wiped the sweat from his forehead as he stood in the massive hangar of Station Omega-7, watching the auctioneer's holographic display cycle through another batch of decommissioned military vessels. The galactic salvage auction happened only once every 5 years, and this time had scraped together enough credits to maybe, just maybe, afford something that could get him off this backwater trading post. The crowd around him was a mix of species from across the galaxy. Tall, blue-skinned Etherians with their crystalline breathing apparatus clicked and whistled to each other in their musical language. Several merchants, their forearms gesturing wildly as they calculated profit margins, dominated one section of the viewing area. Even a few members of the mysterious were present, their sleek forms hidden beneath flowing robes that seemed to absorb light itself. Had been working as a cargo handler on Omega-7 for 3 years, ever since his family's shipping business collapsed under mounting debts. Every day he watched ships come and go, carrying exotic goods and wealthy passengers to destinations he could only dream of visiting. But today might change everything. The auctioneer, a rotund galleon with 3 eyes and a voice that boomed across the hangar through universal translators, was presenting a sleek destroyer. The bidding started at 50,000 credits and quickly escalated. Watched his dreams of owning that particular ship evaporate as the price climbed past 200,000. He checked his credit balance again on his worn 15,200 credits. It wasn't much, but it was everything he had. Ship after ship went under the hammer. A damaged Etherian research vessel sold for 80,000. A barely functional transport shuttle went for 25,000. Began to worry that even the most decrepit vessels would be beyond his reach. Then the auctioneer's tone changed. "Next item," the galleon announced with what sounded suspiciously like embarrassment. "Lot 847. Origin unknown. Classification unknown. Previous owner deceased. No records available. The vessel appears to be largely non-functional, with systems that our technicians have been unable to identify or activate." A collective murmur of disinterest rippled through the crowd. On the holographic display appeared what could generously be called a spaceship, though it looked more like someone had taken a traditional vessel and redesigned it by committee while drunk. The hull was an odd matte black material that seemed to absorb the hangar's lights. Its shape was asymmetrical, with what appeared to be weapon mounts that pointed in seemingly random directions. Most bizarre of all were the strange protrusions along its hull that looked almost organic, like metallic growths rather than deliberate design elements. "The vessel measures approximately 200 meters in length," the auctioneer continued, clearly eager to move on to more promising lots. "Our scans indicate it possesses a basic life support system and rudimentary engines, though we cannot guarantee their functionality. The ship's computer systems are completely incompatible with galactic standard interfaces." Found himself staring at the image. There was something about the ship that called to him, though he couldn't explain what. Maybe it was the way the light seemed to bend around certain sections of the hull, or perhaps it was simply that this might be his only chance to own any vessel at all. "We'll start the bidding at 1,000 credits, the auctioneer said, his third eye already looking toward the next lot. The hangar fell silent, looked around and realized that not a single being had raised their hand, tentacle, or manipulator appendage to bid. The ship was so universally dismissed that even the most desperate scavengers weren't interested. "Do I hear 1,000 credits?" the auctioneer asked again, a note of resignation creeping into his voice. Raised his hand before he could talk himself out of it. "Ah, we have 1,000 from the human in Section C," the auctioneer announced with what sounded like relief. "Do I hear 1,500? Silence. Going once at 1,000 credits. Held his breath. Around him, various species were already focusing on the next lot, a partially intact scout ship that would undoubtedly generate significant interest. Going twice. A merchant near the front raised one of his forearms. 2,000 credits, he called out in accented standard galactic. His heart sank. 2,000 was manageable, but if the price kept climbing. 3,000, called out, his voice cracking slightly. The turned to look at him, all 4 eyes focusing on with an expression that clearly conveyed his opinion of human intelligence. After a moment, the merchant shrugged and turned back to examine data on his own pad, apparently calculating that no ship was worth getting into a bidding war with a crazy human. Going once at 3,000 credits to the human, the auctioneer announced. Waited, his palms sweating. Going twice. sold to the human for 3,000 credits. Lot 847 to Section C. The sound of his heartbeat seemed to echo in his ears as realized what he had just done. He had spent nearly a quarter of his savings on a ship that galactic experts couldn't even figure out how to turn on. As the auction continued around him, made his way to the registration desk. The Etherian clerk who processed his payment looked at him with what he assumed was pity, though it was hard to tell with their alien features. Dock 94C, the clerk said in their musical voice, handing him a data chip with the ship's berth location. Good luck, human, you will need it. 2 hours later, stood in front of Dock 94C, staring at his purchase through the transparent aluminum viewing port. Seeing the ship in person was somehow even more unsettling than the holographic display had been. Up close, he could see that what he had taken for random design elements were actually incredibly complex patterns etched into the hull. The metallic growths he had noticed seemed to pulse very faintly with internal light. The docking tube connected with a soft hiss and entered his new ship for the first time. The airlock opened into a corridor that every expectation he had about spaceship design. Instead of the utilitarian metal walls and harsh lighting he was accustomed to, the passage was lined with the same matte black material as the exterior. But here, closer examination revealed that it wasn't metal at all. It felt warm to the touch and seemed to have a very subtle texture, almost like leather but smoother. Emergency lighting strips along the floor provided just enough illumination to navigate, casting strange shadows that seemed to move independently of his position. As he walked deeper into the ship, noticed that his footsteps made no sound on the deck plating. The corridor opened into what he assumed was the main cabin, though calling it a bridge would be generous. The space was dominated by a single chair that looked like it had been grown rather than built. Its surface was the same warm, dark material as the walls, but shaped in flowing curves that seemed designed for human anatomy. How that was possible couldn't begin to guess. Banks of dark panels lined the walls, their purposes completely unclear. Unlike the familiar arrays of buttons, switches, and displays found on galactic standard vessels, these surfaces were smooth and featureless, marked only by faint patterns that reminded of circuit traces or perhaps neural pathways. He approached the chair cautiously and sat down. The moment his body made contact with the surface, the ship came alive. Panels throughout the cabin began to glow with soft, amber light. The patterns on the walls pulsed gently, creating the impression of electrical activity flowing through living tissue. Most startling of all, information began to appear directly in his vision, as if someone was projecting text onto his retinas. Biological pattern recognized. Species, human Terra. Authorization status, pending. Initiating compatibility assessment. Tried to stand up, but found that he couldn't move. Not because he was restrained, but because every muscle in his body had gone completely numb. Panic flooded through him as more text appeared in his visual field. Neural interface calibration in progress. Do not attempt to move. Estimated completion time, 847 standard seconds. As the minutes ticked by, felt a strange, tingling sensation spreading through his body. It wasn't painful, but it was deeply unsettling to feel something interfacing directly with his nervous system. He tried to call out, but found that he couldn't make his vocal cords respond. Compatibility confirmed. Human neural pattern within acceptable parameters. Warning, this vessel's CAPABLITAS exceed current galactic treaty LIMITATONS. Full system activation will mark operator as priority target. Do you wish to continue, YN? Didn't know how to respond to a question that appeared directly in his mind. He tried thinking yes, but nothing happened. After several minutes of experimentation, he discovered that he could somehow direct his attention toward the Y and it would brighten slightly. He hesitated. The ship was clearly far more advanced than anything he had ever encountered, and the warning about becoming a priority target was ominous. But what choice did he have? He had spent his savings on this vessel, and his job at the station barely paid enough to cover basic living expenses. This ship represented his only chance at a different life. Focused his attention on Y. Authorization confirmed. Welcome, operator. Designation, MARCUSCHEN. This vessel is now bonded to your biological signature. Full system integration will occur gradually to prevent neural trauma. You now have access to 0.001% of available functions. Basic flight controls enabled. Sensation returned his body in a rush that left him gasping. But along with normal feeling came something entirely new. He could sense the ship around him as if it were an extension of his own body. The hull's structural integrity, the status of the life support systems, the charge level of what he somehow knew were quantum batteries far more advanced than anything in the galactic database. When he stood up and moved toward what looked like it might be navigation controls, information flowed into his consciousness without effort. Stellar coordinates, traffic control frequencies, atmospheric pressure readings from outside the ship. It was overwhelming and wonderful at the same time. A soft chime drew his attention to one of the glowing panels. Text appeared both on the surface and in his mind simultaneously. Incoming communication from Station Omega 7 Traffic Control. Somehow knew exactly how to accept the transmission. A controller's image appeared in the air above the panel, his four arms gesturing with typical efficiency. Unregistered vessel in Dock 94C, you are required to file a flight plan before departure. What is your intended destination? Realized he had no idea where he wanted to go. He had been so focused on simply owning a ship that he hadn't thought about what came next. I need to register for general transport certification, he said finally. Understood. Report to Navigation Authority Office, Level 12, Section B, within 6 standard hours for classification testing. Be aware that your vessel does not appear in our database. You will need to provide technical specifications for safety certification. The transmission ended, leaving alone with his thoughts and his mysterious new ship. Technical specifications were going to be a problem, since he had no idea what most of the ship's systems actually did. But he had 6 hours to figure something out. As he explored the ship more thoroughly, discovered living quarters that were surprisingly comfortable, despite their alien aesthetic. The furniture seemed to adjust automatically to his presence, and the lighting dimmed or brightened based on his apparent needs. Most intriguing was what appeared to be a workshop area filled with tools and devices that he couldn't identify but somehow understood the purpose of. It was in this workshop that made his first real discovery about the ship's capabilities. While examining what looked like a fabrication unit, he accidentally triggered its activation. The machine hummed to life and projected a holographic interface that responded to his thoughts rather than touch. Through experimentation, he learned that the device could create almost anything he could visualize, as long as the ship's material reserves were sufficient. When he imagined a simple tool he needed to adjust his personal equipment, the machine produced it in minutes, constructing it atom by atom from base elements. This was technology that was theoretically possible according to galactic science, but no civilization had managed to make it practical on a large scale. The energy requirements alone should have been prohibitive, yet his ship seemed to have no trouble powering the device. More troubling was the gradual realization that much of the ship's technology was not just advanced beyond current galactic standards, but beyond the theoretical limits that most species believed were possible. The neural interface that allowed him to control the ship directly was considered science fiction by most researchers. The quantum batteries provided more power than a fusion reactor twice their size, and the fabrication unit could manipulate matter at the atomic level with casual ease. As he prepared to visit the Navigation Authority office, began to understand why the ship had been sold at auction with no information about its origins. This wasn't just an advanced vessel from some unknown species. This was something that shouldn't exist according to everything the galaxy thought it knew about physics and engineering. The question that kept echoing in his mind as he locked down the ship's systems and prepared to leave was simple but terrifying. Who had built this vessel, and why had they made it compatible with human biology? Walking through the station's corridors toward the Navigation Authority office, couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just changed in ways he couldn't yet comprehend. The ship had accepted him, bonded with him, and granted him access to technology that could revolutionize galactic civilization or destroy it entirely. And according to the ship's own warning system, simply activating its full capabilities would mark him as a priority target for forces he didn't yet understand. But there was no going back now. The ship was his, he was its, and together they were about to discover exactly what that meant for both his future and the galaxy's. 3 weeks after purchasing his mysterious ship, had managed to obtain basic transport certification by providing carefully edited technical specifications. The Navigation Authority's Etherian inspector had been suspicious of several readings that seemed impossible, but had convinced her they were sensor errors. Now, with his first legitimate cargo contract in hand, he was finally ready to take his ship beyond the confines of Station Omega-7. The job was simple enough. Transport a shipment of rare crystals from Omega-7 to the mining colony on 442C. It was exactly the kind of routine run that new independent operators typically started with. The pay was modest but fair, and the route was well-traveled and considered safe. Had spent the past weeks learning to work with his ship systems, though learning might not be the right word. The neural interface meant that operating the vessel was more like remembering how to do something he had always known rather than acquiring new skills. It was deeply unsettling, but also incredibly efficient. As he guided the ship away from the station's docking ring, felt the familiar tingle of the neural connection expanding. The ship's sensors became his senses, extending his awareness far beyond the confines of the hull. He could feel the gravitational pull of the system's star, sense the electromagnetic signatures of other vessels, and perceive radiation patterns that painted a detailed picture of local space. Departure Vector Optimal. Quantum Drive CHARGNG. Estimated travel time 2 KPLER 442C, 6.7 standard hours. The ship's quantum drive was another technology that shouldn't have existed. While most vessels relied on conventional faster-than-light engines that required several hours to charge and could only make jumps between specific beacon points, his ship seemed capable of point-to-point travel with minimal preparation time. Omega-7 Control, this is cargo vessel. Paused, realizing he had never given his ship a name. This is cargo vessel Prometheus, requesting departure clearance for the 442 system. Prometheus, you are cleared for departure. Safe travels and welcome to independent operation. As engaged the quantum drive, he felt the ship's excitement. There was no other word for it. Through the neural link, he could sense something that felt remarkably like anticipation from the vessel's systems, as if the ship itself was eager to finally stretch its capabilities. The transition to quantum space was unlike anything had experienced on conventional vessels. Instead of the violent shaking and disorientation typical of FTL travel, he felt a moment of perfect stillness, followed by a sensation of incredible speed that somehow remained completely comfortable. Quantum tunnel established. All systems OPRATNG within normal PARMETRS. Estimated arrival in 6.2 standard hours. With the autopilot engaged, had time to continue exploring his ship's capabilities. He had discovered that the vessel contained far more space than its external dimensions suggested, with sections that seemed to exist in folded space pockets. The workshop area alone was larger than most ships' entire cargo holds, and he had found at least 3 levels of living quarters that the laws of physics. Most intriguing was a section of the ship that remained sealed to him. The neural interface indicated that these areas required higher authorization levels, which he could apparently earn by demonstrating competence with the systems he already had access to. It was like the ship was gradually testing him, determining whether he could be trusted with more advanced capabilities. During the journey to 442C, experimented with the fabrication unit, learning to create increasingly complex devices. He started with simple tools and gradually worked his way up to electronics and even basic weapons. The ship seemed to encourage this experimentation, providing subtle guidance through the neural interface when he attempted something beyond his current understanding. It was while creating a new comm unit with extended range capabilities that made a disturbing discovery. The fabrication unit's database contained detailed schematics for weapons and defensive systems that were clearly military in nature, but unlike any designs in the galactic database. The energy weapons were based on principles that most species considered theoretical. The defensive systems included shielding technology that could apparently render a vessel completely undetectable to conventional sensors. Most alarming were the offensive capabilities that seemed designed not just to destroy enemy ships, but to completely disintegrate them at the molecular level. Warning: advanced weapon systems require authorization level 7. Current operator authorization, level 1. Unauthorized fabrication of restricted ITEMS will result in system lockdown. carefully backed away from the more dangerous schematics, but their mere existence raised troubling questions. This wasn't just an advanced exploration or transport vessel. It was a warship, designed by someone who understood combat technology far beyond anything currently available in the galaxy. The arrival at 442C proceeded without incident. The mining colony was a typical frontier settlement, with basic facilities carved into the surface of an airless moon. Delivered his cargo of crystals to the colony administrator, a gruff human named who had been running mining operations in the outer systems for over 20 years. "Nice ship," commented as they completed the transfer paperwork. "Never seen anything quite like it, custom build." "Something like that," replied carefully. "Well, whatever you paid for it, you got a good deal. My sensors couldn't get a clear reading on your approach vector. Your stealth systems are impressive." Tried not to show his surprise. He hadn't activated any stealth systems that he knew of, which meant the ship was concealing itself automatically. "Thanks, I should get going. Long trip back to Omega 7. "Actually," said, lowering his voice, "if you're looking for more work, I might have something. Off the books, if you know what I mean. The pay would be considerably better than standard cargo runs." "What kind of work?" "There's a situation developing in the Vega sector. Some kind of territorial dispute between the Confederacy and the Collective. Both sides are looking for independent operators to move sensitive materials without leaving official records." Felt a chill run down his spine. The neural interface was providing him with information about the Vega sector situation, and the details were far more concerning than casual description suggested. According to the ship's databases, what was describing as a territorial dispute was actually the opening moves of what could become a full-scale galactic war. "I appreciate the offer," said carefully, "but I think I'll stick with legitimate cargo runs for now." Shrugged, "Your choice, but if you change your mind, you know where to find me." During the return journey to Omega 7, found himself thinking about S's offer and the ship's reaction to it. Through the neural interface, he had sensed something that felt almost like eagerness when the mining colony administrator mentioned the Vega sector conflict. It was as if the ship wanted to be involved in dangerous situations. Operator stress LEVELS elevated. Recommend meditation protocol alpha. ACCSSING, ENHANCED relaxation systems. Before could ask what meditation protocol alpha was, the ship's environmental systems shifted subtly. The lighting took on a warmer tone, the air circulation system began producing barely audible harmonic frequencies, and the temperature adjusted to optimal comfort levels. Within minutes, felt his tension melting away. The fact that his ship could monitor his stress levels and respond with therapeutic countermeasures was both comforting and deeply unsettling. How much of his biology was the ship monitoring, and what was it doing with that information? His contemplation was interrupted by an alarm that sounded both in the cabin and directly in his mind. Proximity alert. Multiple VSSLS DETCTD. Configuration SUGGSDS hostile intent. Recommend immediate defensive action. Through the ship's sensors, could perceive 3 vessels moving to intercept his course. They were configured in a classic attack formation, and their energy signatures indicated weapons systems charging. Incoming transmission. A holographic display activated, showing the bridge of what appeared to be a heavily modified freight hauler. The figure speaking was but not like any had encountered in legitimate business. This one had cybernetic implants covering half his face, and his ship's interior was decorated with trophies that looked suspiciously like they had been taken from defeated enemies. Unknown vessel, you will cut engines and prepare to be boarded. Resist and you will be destroyed. Pirates, of course his first real cargo run would attract pirates. I'm carrying standard trade goods, replied, trying to keep his voice steady. Nothing worth the trouble of piracy charges if you're caught. The laughed, a harsh sound that the universal translator rendered as mechanical static. We're not after your cargo, human. That ship of yours is very interesting. Our clients are willing to pay handsomely for any vessel with unregistered technology. Felt the ship's systems responding to the threat before he consciously made any decision to fight. The neural interface expanded, granting him access to capabilities that had been locked away. Threat assessment complete. Authorization level temporarily elevated to level 3. Combat SYSDMS Online. Weapons CHARGING. Recommend immediate neutralization of hostile forces. Suddenly could perceive things about the pirate vessels that should have been impossible to detect. He could see the distribution of their crews, the weak points in their hull armor, the exact specifications of their weapons systems. More than that, he could feel the ship's weapons systems as if they were extensions of his own body. "I'll give you one chance to withdraw," said, surprised by the confidence in his own voice. "Amusing, 3 ships against 1, and the human thinks he can negotiate." The lead pirate vessel opened fire with plasma cannons, lances of superheated energy that would have been devastating against any conventional ship. Didn't consciously direct his ship's response. The defensive systems activated automatically. What happened next? Everything thought he knew about space combat. Instead of raising energy shields like every other ship in the galaxy, his vessel simply wasn't there when the plasma bolts arrived. The ship had moved, but not through normal propulsion. One moment they were directly in the path of the weapon's fire, the next they were several thousand kilometers away, positioned perfectly behind the attacking formation. Quantum displacement successful. Enemy VSSLS vulnerable. Recommend precision strikes to disable. Felt the ship's weapons systems requesting permission to fire. But these weren't the crude plasma cannons or missile systems he was familiar with. The ship's armament was based on principles he couldn't even pronounce, designed to disrupt matter at the quantum level. "Disable only," he said aloud, though he realized the ship could sense his intentions directly. "Acknowledged. Targeting engine systems. Firing." The ship's weapons didn't produce visible beams or projectiles. Instead, the 3 pirate vessels simply stopped moving. Their engines went dark, their weapons powered down, and their life support systems reduced to minimum levels. Hostile VSSLS NUTRLIZD. No CSULTISDTCTD. Recommend departing area before Ariana4 CMENTS arrive. The lead pirate's transmission came through again, but now this confidence had been replaced by terror. What are you? What kind of ship is that?" "The kind that doesn't like pirates," replied. "Consider this a warning. If I ever encounter any of you again, I won't be so gentle." As his ship departed the area, tried to process what had just happened. He had been in his first space combat, facing 3-to-1 odds, and had won without breaking a sweat. His ship had capabilities that were so advanced they seemed like magic, and he had access to only a tiny fraction of its total potential. Combat performance satisfactory. Authorization level increased to level 2. Additional SYSDMS now available. Warning, quantum displacement signature detectable by advanced sensors. Recommend avoiding high security, SYSDMS, until stealth improvements implemented. The ship was warning him that their defensive maneuver had created a detectable signature. Anyone with sufficiently advanced sensors would be able to track where they had been and what they had done, and was beginning to suspect that there were forces in the galaxy with exactly that kind of advanced technology. As he approached Station Omega-7, realized that his life had changed again. He was no longer just an independent cargo hauler with an unusual ship. He was now the operator of a vessel with capabilities that could shift the balance of power in any conflict it became involved in. The question was what he was going to do with that knowledge, and more importantly, what the galaxy was going to do to him when it discovered what he was flying. Incoming priority transmission. Source classified. Recommendation, accept communication. Before could respond, the transmission activated automatically. The holographic display showed a figure that made his blood run cold. It was humanoid, but clearly not human. The being's skin had a metallic sheen, and its eyes were solid silver with no visible pupils. When it spoke, its voice bypassed the universal translator entirely, speaking directly into his mind. "The vessel you pilot was taken without authorization. You have 3 standard days to surrender it for proper disposal. Failure to comply will result in your classification as an enemy combatant. This is your only warning." The transmission ended, leaving alone with a terrible realization. Whoever had built his ship was still out there, and they wanted it back. Spent the next 2 days in a state of barely controlled panic. The mysterious transmission had made it clear that possessing his ship was far more dangerous than he had realized. But every time he considered surrendering the vessel, the neural interface would flood his consciousness with information that made him reconsider. The ship wasn't just advanced technology from an unknown species. According to the data flooding through the neural link, it was a prototype vessel from humanity's own future, sent back through time using principles that mainstream galactic science insisted were impossible. Temporal displacement successful. Destination: Galactic Year 2387. Mission: Prevent Extinction Event Probability Cascade. Operator LOCATED and bonded. Phase 1 complete. The revelations came in fragments, each piece of information unlocked as demonstrated greater competence with the ship systems. Humanity, it seemed, was destined to become something far more significant than the galaxy's current superpowers realized. But that destiny was under threat from forces that had been manipulating galactic development for. The beings who had transmitted the ultimatum were called the Architects. They weren't just another advanced species competing for territory and resources. They were the hidden puppet masters who had been guiding galactic civilization along specific pathways, ensuring that no single species could develop enough power to threaten their control. Architect Intervention DETCTED in 847, Historical EVENTS. Probability: Human technological development deliberately suppressed. Estimated natural development timeline: 400 years ahead of current status. Architect Goal: Maintain technological dependence in all species. Every major breakthrough in galactic history had been carefully managed. The universal translator technology that allowed different species to communicate. It contained hidden subroutines that limited complex philosophical and scientific concepts from being shared between civilizations. The faster-than-light travel systems that connected the galaxy. They relied on beacon networks that the Architects could control, effectively giving them the power to isolate any system that became too independent. Even the galactic government structure had been designed to prevent any single species from accumulating too much power. The carefully balanced councils and trade agreements weren't the result of diplomatic wisdom, but of architect manipulation spanning thousands of years. But humanity had been different. When humans first developed space travel and encountered the galactic community, something about human psychology and creativity had allowed them to see through some of the Architects' deceptions. Small groups of human researchers had begun making connections that threatened to expose the entire control system. Human resistance probability: 67.3%. Architect response: Biological warfare authorized. Projected outcome: human extinction within 200 years. The ship's databases contained detailed information about humanity's future. In the original timeline, an engineered plague had swept through human space in the year 2394, wiping out over 90% of the human population. The survivors had been so focused on rebuilding that they never resumed the research that had threatened Architect control. But a small group of human scientists and engineers had seen the attack coming. Using technology reverse-engineered from captured Architect systems, they had built a single vessel capable of traveling back in time. Their mission was to find an operator in the past who could prevent the extinction event by exposing the Architect's control system to the galaxy. Was that operator? The ship had been designed specifically to interface with human neural patterns, and it contained enough evidence of Architect manipulation to convince even the most skeptical galactic governments. But first, he had to survive long enough to share that evidence. Warning: Architect forces DETCTD. Multiple VSSLS approaching Station Omega 7. Configuration: Military Assault Formation. Estimated time to contact: 47 minutes. Through the ship's sensors, could perceive the approaching fleet. 7 vessels that appeared on conventional scanners as typical patrol ships, but the ship's advanced sensors revealed their true nature. Architect technology hidden beneath conventional disguises, equipped with weapons capable of sterilizing entire planets. Recommendation: immediate departure. Probability of successful escape: 23.7%. Alternative: activate Protocol Omega. Authorization required. Didn't know what Protocol Omega was, but something in the way the ship presented the option made him hesitate. Through the neural link, he could sense that activating it would irrevocably change everything, not just for him, but for the entire galaxy. "Show me what Protocol Omega does," he said aloud. Protocol Omega, full system activation. Warning, operator will gain access to complete database. Knowledge transfer may cause psychological trauma. Ship CAPABLITIS will increase to 100%. Galactic detection probability, 99.9%. Architect response, total war. Felt a chill run down his spine. The ship was asking him to choose between almost certain death trying to escape with limited capabilities, or revealing the full scope of its technology and triggering a galactic war. But as he considered his options, more information flowed through the neural interface. The architects weren't just going to kill him and reclaim the ship. They were planning to use his capture as justification for implementing even stricter controls on galactic technology development. His death would actually help them maintain their dominance. Architect Fleet entering system. Time to contact, 31 MINUTS. Station Omega 7 evacuation PROTOCOLS, not initiated. Civilian CASULTIES projected, 47,000. That decided it. Couldn't let 47,000 beings die because he was afraid of the consequences of fighting back. Activate Protocol Omega, he said firmly. Acknowledged. Beginning full system integration. Warning, neural interface expansion will be intense. Do not resist the process. The change was immediate and overwhelming. Felt his consciousness expand beyond the confines of his body, merging with the ship's vast intelligence. Suddenly he had access to the complete historical database, showing him thousands of years of architect manipulation. He could see the careful sabotage of promising research projects, the assassination of scientists who asked the wrong questions, the systematic suppression of technologies that could have advanced galactic civilization by. But more than knowledge, he gained capability. The ship's weapon systems came online, revealing armaments that could reshape matter at the quantum level. The defensive systems activated, surrounding the vessel with fields that existed in folded space and were completely invisible to conventional detection. The propulsion systems engaged, giving him access to movement capabilities that treated the normal laws of physics as mere suggestions. Integration complete. Authorization level, maximum. All SYSDMS operational. Architect Fleet DATACTED and targeted. Awaiting orders. Through the ship's sensors, could now see the Architect Fleet with perfect clarity. 7 vessels that looked like conventional galactic military ships, but were actually technological marvels that represented thousands of years of suppressed advancement. Each one was crewed by beings who had given up their biological forms centuries ago, uploading their consciousness into mechanical bodies that could survive indefinitely. But they had made one crucial mistake. In all their of controlling galactic development, they had never encountered technology that was genuinely from the future. Ship represented an evolutionary branch of development that they had never seen before. Incoming transmission from Architect Fleet. The lead vessel's commander appeared on the holographic display. This architect looked different from the one who had delivered the ultimatum. Its mechanical body was more elaborate, decorated with symbols that now recognized as indicating high rank within their hierarchy. Human operator, the architect spoke directly into his mind. You have activated technology that you cannot comprehend. Surrender now and your death will be quick. I understand more than you think, replied. Through the ship's communication systems, he could speak directly to all 7 vessels simultaneously. I know what you've done to this galaxy. I know about the suppressed technologies, the manipulated governments, the species you've eliminated when they got too close to the truth. Knowledge without wisdom is dangerous, human. You think you can challenge a system that has maintained galactic stability for 10,000 years. Stability, laughed, and the sound carried across all frequencies. You call systematic oppression stability. You've kept entire civilizations locked in technological childhood because you're afraid of what they might accomplish if they reached their full potential. We have prevented wars that would have destroyed billions of lives, the architect replied. We have guided development along safe pathways. Without our guidance, chaos would have consumed the galaxy long ago. Without your interference, the galaxy would have solved its problems centuries ago. Every species would have had the chance to reach their true potential instead of being locked into the roles you assigned them. Architect Weapons CHARGNG. Recommend immediate defensive action. Could feel the 7 ships preparing to fire, their weapons systems charging with energies that could crack planets. But he could also feel his own ship's response systems, technologies that existed outside the architect's understanding. This is your last chance, human. Surrender the vessel or be destroyed. Counteroffer, replied. Withdraw your fleet and end your manipulation of galactic development, or I'll show this galaxy exactly what you've been hiding from them. The architect's response was immediate. All 7 ships opened fire simultaneously, unleashing energies that should have vaporized the vessel instantly. Instead, the ship simply absorbed the incoming energy, converting it directly into power for its own systems. Energy absorption complete. Power RESRVES at 147% of normal. Return fire authorized. Felt the ship's weapons targeting the architect fleet. Not to destroy them, but to disable their systems while simultaneously broadcasting a detailed record of their historical manipulations across all galactic communication networks. Firing, the ship's weapons reached out across space, not with destructive energy, but with information. Each architect vessel found its communication systems overwhelmed with data downloads, their defensive systems neutralized by quantum fields that operated according to principles they had never encountered. Simultaneously, every communication array in the galaxy received a massive data package containing 10,000 years of suppressed history. The real story of galactic development, complete with evidence of architect manipulation, technological suppression, and systematic species control. Galactic Communication, NETWRKS ACCSSED. Historical database uploaded. Transmission complete. Probability of truth acceptance, 78.3%. The effect was immediate. Across the galaxy, governments that had been following architect guidance for suddenly had access to the complete truth about their technological limitations. Research projects that had been mysteriously shut down could finally resume. Species that had been convinced they were naturally limited could see the artificial barriers that had been placed on their development. Incoming TRANSMISSIONS, 1,247,893. Source, multiple galactic governments. General content, DMANDS-4 Architect explanation. The architect fleet, meanwhile, had been completely disabled. Their ships hung in space, powerless and defenseless, their crews finally experiencing the vulnerability that they had inflicted on others for so long. You have doomed this galaxy, the lead architect transmitted, its mental voice filled with what sounded suspiciously like fear. Without our guidance, the species will destroy themselves within a generation. Maybe, replied, but at least they'll have the chance to try, and if they succeed, they'll build something better than your carefully controlled stagnation. Additional architect, fleet's deity. Approaching from multiple SECTORS. Estimated arrival, 72 hours. Galactic response, FLETS also MOBILIZNG. Probability of galactic war, 94.7%. Realized that his actions had indeed triggered the galactic war that the ship's warnings had predicted. But as information continued to flow through the neural interface, he understood that this war had always been inevitable. The architects would never have willingly given up their control, and the galaxy's species would never have accepted the truth about their suppression without fighting for their freedom. What he had done was ensure that when the war came, it would be a fair fight. New transmission, DATSATD. Source, Terran Federation Command. Priority maximum. The transmission came from Admiral Sarah, the commanding officer of humanity's small but growing space fleet. Was surprised to discover that she shared his last name, though he didn't remember having any military relatives. The Admiral said, her voice carrying a note of familiarity that suggested she knew exactly who he was. If you're receiving this transmission, then the temporal mission was successful. I'm your great niece, by the way. The family has been waiting for this day for 3 generations. Felt his world shift again. His family hadn't just known about the time travel mission, they had been part of it from the beginning. The evidence you've provided has been enough to convince the Terran Federation Council to authorize Operation Freedom, Admiral continued. We're going to offer technological assistance to any species willing to fight for their independence from architect control. The ships of the human fleet have been equipped with reverse-engineered future technology, and we're ready to stand with our galactic neighbors against tyranny. Terran Fleet Deity Citidi. Approaching Station Omega-7. Configuration, Full Battle Group. Technology level, ENHANCED with future systems. Through his ship's sensors, could see the human fleet approaching. Ships that looked conventional from the outside, but were equipped with the same temporal technology that powered his vessel. Humanity had been preparing for this moment for generations, building a force capable of standing against the architects when the time came to fight. Galactic Coalition FORMING. Species JOINING Anti-Architect Alliance, 47. Projected Coalition Fleet Strength, 15,000 vessels. Architect Forces, 3,000 vessels estimated. Probability of Coalition victory, 67.8%. Across the galaxy, the revelation of architect manipulation had triggered exactly the response that ship had been designed to create. Species that had been kept artificially weak were combining their resources to build the technologies they had been. Governments that had been puppets were declaring independence and preparing to fight for it. The galaxy was about to fight its first war for true freedom in 10,000 years. Incoming transmission from Architect High Command. The transmission came from a vessel that sensors indicated was massive beyond anything he had previously encountered. The architect that appeared on the display was clearly ancient. Its mechanical form, decorated with symbols of authority that suggested it, had been manipulating galactic events since the early days of civilization. "You have made a grave error, human," the ancient being said. "We offered guidance and stability. Now you will have chaos and destruction. When the lesser species destroy themselves in the wars to come, remember that their blood is on your hands. The blood of every being your people have murdered over the past 10,000 years is on yours," replied. "At least now the galaxy has a chance to choose its own path. So be it. If the species of this galaxy insist on learning through pain, we will teach them the hardest lessons of all." The transmission ended, and knew that the real war was just beginning. But as he looked at the growing coalition fleet assembling around Station Omega-7, he felt something he hadn't experienced since buying his ship at auction: hope. Mission status, Phase 1 complete. Phase 2 beginning, Galactic Liberation. Operator performance, exemplary. Recommendation, prepare for extended campaign. The ship's voice in his mind carried a note of what could only be called pride. Together, they had accomplished exactly what the mission planners from humanity's future had hoped for. The galaxy now knew the truth about its suppressed potential, and species across known space were preparing to fight for their freedom. Former cargo handler and accidental time warrior had just started the war that would determine whether the galaxy's children would grow up free or remain forever under the control of their hidden masters. And for the first time since this adventure began, he was ready for whatever came next.